Nobody thought a trembling recruit who couldn't even hold a rifle, steady during her first day of basic training, would become the fastest weapons technician in military history. Most dismissed her as hopeless when she fumbled with the safety mechanism, dropped magazines, and needed 3 attempts just to properly shoulder her weapon. But 6 months later, she would shatter every record at the International Military Skills Competition, disassembling and reassembling 20 different weapon systems in under 5 minutes while blindfolded, proving that steady hands aren't born, they're forged through relentless determination and countless hours of practice that nobody else was willing to invest. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead in the armory of Fort McKinley, casting harsh shadows across rows of gleaming metal and polymer that represented the cutting edge of military firepower. The smell of gun oil and cleaning solvent permeated the air so thoroughly that it seemed to seep into clothing and hair, marking anyone who spent time here with the distinctive scent of professional weapons maintenance. Along the concrete walls, weapons racks stretched from floor to ceiling, holding everything from standard-issue service rifles to specialized marksman weapons, each one meticulously maintained and catalogued according to strict military protocols that demanded absolute precision in every aspect of handling and care. The armory served as both classroom and workshop for Fort McKinley's Advanced Weapons Training Program, an intensive course designed to produce the military's next generation of weapons specialists and armorer technicians. Students who successfully completed the program would be qualified to maintain, repair, and modify the complex weapon systems that form the backbone of modern military operations. The course had a reputation for being notoriously difficult, with a failure rate that approached 60%, as instructors pushed students beyond their perceived limitations through demanding practical exercises and written examinations that required mastery of hundreds of technical specifications and procedures. Sergeant First Class Marcus Thompson stood at the front of the armory like a monument to military precision. At 6 feet 4 inches tall with shoulders that seemed to span the width of a doorframe, he commanded attention through sheer physical presence before he even opened his mouth. His uniform was pressed to geometric perfection, with creases sharp enough to cut paper and brass that gleamed like mirrors under the artificial lighting. 23 years of military service had carved lines into his face that spoke of countless hours spent in harsh conditions, but his eyes remained sharp and alert, constantly scanning his surroundings with the vigilance of someone who understood that attention to detail could mean the difference between life and death. Thompson had earned his reputation as the most demanding weapons instructor in the entire military education system. His students either emerged as exceptionally competent technicians, or they found themselves reassigned to less technical specialties after failing to meet his exacting standards. He believed that weapons maintenance was a sacred trust that required not just technical knowledge, but also the kind of unwavering attention to detail that could only be developed through rigorous training and constant practice. His teaching methods were legendary for their intensity, designed to simulate the stress and pressure that weapons technicians would face in actual combat situations, where equipment failures could have catastrophic consequences. The morning light filtering through high windows illuminated 24 students arranged in precise rows, each standing behind a metal workstation that held an array of tools and partially disassembled weapons. The students represented diverse backgrounds and military occupational specialties, but they shared the common goal of mastering the complex technical skills required for advanced weapons maintenance. Most had already completed basic military training and demonstrated aptitude for mechanical work, earning them selection for this prestigious program that would determine their future career trajectories within the military's technical specialties. Among these students, positioned in the back corner where shadows fell deepest, stood Emma Rodriguez. At barely 5 feet 2 inches tall, She seemed almost lost among the larger military-issued workstations and equipment that surrounded her. Her uniform, even in the smallest available size, hung loose on her petite frame, with sleeves that extended past her wrists and trouser legs that had been hemmed multiple times to achieve proper length. The military boots on her feet, despite being the smallest size manufactured, still appeared oversized, giving her the appearance of a child wearing adult equipment. Emma's hands shook with barely perceptible tremors as she attempted to follow Thompson's demonstration of proper rifle disassembly procedures. The standard issue rifle felt disproportionately heavy in her grip, its weight distribution challenging her ability to maintain steady control during the precise manipulations required. For field stripping, her fingers, while small and theoretically well-suited for detailed work, seemed to fumble with components that other students handled with growing confidence. Each time she attempted to release the bolt carrier group, her hands would shake slightly, causing the mechanism to catch or bind in ways that drew frustrated sighs from nearby classmates. The other students had quickly established their own social hierarchy based on apparent competence and natural ability. Private First Class Jake Morrison, a former automotive mechanic from Detroit, demonstrated an intuitive understanding of mechanical systems that impressed even Thompson. His large hands moved with surprising delicacy as he manipulated weapon components, and his background in civilian mechanics translated seamlessly to military weapon systems. Morrison had become an unofficial leader among the students, offering advice and assistance to struggling classmates while consistently performing at the top of the class rankings. Specialist Sarah Chun brought engineering experience from her civilian education, approaching weapons maintenance with systematic methodology that earned Thompson's grudging approval. Her academic background provided her with theoretical knowledge that complemented the practical skills being taught, allowing her to understand not just how procedures should be performed, but why specific techniques were required. Chung's workstation was organized with mathematical precision, every tool positioned for optimal efficiency, every component arranged according to logical patterns that reflected her analytical approach to complex problems. Corporal David Kim had transferred from infantry service, bringing practical experience with weapon systems under field conditions. His familiarity with how weapons performed in combat situations gave him insights that purely technical students lacked, and his ability to troubleshoot problems under pressure made him a valuable asset during timed exercises. Kim understood the real-world implications of proper maintenance procedures, having experienced firsthand how equipment failures could compromise mission effectiveness and endanger lives. These three students formed a natural study group that met during off-duty hours to practice procedures and share knowledge. Their collaboration was encouraged by Thompson, who recognized that peer teaching could reinforce learning while building the kind of teamwork essential for military operations. However, their group unconsciously excluded Emma, not out of deliberate malice, but because her apparent struggles with basic procedures made her seem like someone who would slow down their progress rather than contribute to collective improvement. Emma noticed the exclusion, but accepted it as a natural consequence of her obvious difficulties with the coursework. She had grown accustomed to being overlooked or dismissed in situations that demanded physical presence or technical competence. Her academic background in library science had prepared her for research and information management, but provided no relevant experience with mechanical systems or hands-on technical work. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. She had enlisted in the military partly to challenge herself beyond the sedentary intellectual work that had defined her civilian career. But the gap between her aspirations and her apparent capabilities seemed to widen with each passing day. The morning's lesson focused on the M4 carbine, the standard infantry weapon that formed the foundation for more advanced weapons training. Thompson's demonstration was masterful, his large hands moving with practiced efficiency as he explained. each step of the disassembly process. He removed the bolt carrier group with a single fluid motion, extracted the firing pin with casual precision, and laid out components in perfect alignment while maintaining a running commentary on proper procedures and common mistakes. "Weapons maintenance is not about speed," Thompson announced, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had seen the consequences of improper procedures. "It's about consistency, accuracy, and absolute attention to detail. A weapon that's been maintained correctly will function reliably under any conditions. A weapon that's been maintained carelessly will fail when you need it most, and that failure could cost lives." Emma listened intently to every word, taking detailed notes. In handwriting so small and precise that it resembled mechanical printing. Her notebook filled with diagrams, specifications, and procedural notes that went far beyond what other students considered necessary. While her classmates focused on memorizing basic procedures, Emma documented every nuance of Thompson's technique, every casual comment about advanced applications, every reference to specialized tools or alternative methods that might prove useful in unusual circumstances. Thompson's teaching philosophy emphasized learning through repetition and gradually increasing complexity. Students began with basic field stripping procedures, progressing through complete disassembly and reassembly before advancing to maintenance, tasks that required specialized tools and knowledge. Each lesson built upon previous instruction, creating a foundation of knowledge that would support increasingly sophisticated technical skills. The pace was deliberately challenging, designed to identify students who possessed not just mechanical aptitude, but also the persistence and attention to detail required for professional weapons maintenance. During the practical exercise that followed Thompson's demonstration, Emma's difficulties became immediately apparent to everyone in the classroom. Her attempts to remove the bolt carrier group resulted in fumbling and hesitation that drew attention from nearby students. The rifle seemed to resist her efforts, with components that should have moved smoothly instead catching and binding in ways that suggested improper technique or insufficient strength. "Rodriguez, you're fighting the weapon instead of working with it," Thompson observed, his voice carrying a mixture of patience and concern. "Weapons maintenance requires confidence and smooth, deliberate movements. Hesitation and uncertainty will cause more problems than lack of knowledge." Emma nodded and attempted to follow his guidance, but her hands continued to shake with nervous energy that made precise manipulation difficult. The bolt carrier group finally came free with an awkward jerk that nearly caused her to drop the component, eliciting a barely suppressed snicker from Morrison at the adjacent workstation. Her face flushed with embarrassment as she struggled to maintain composure while fumbling with components that other students handled with increasing ease. The reassembly process proved even more challenging as Emma attempted to reverse the disassembly procedures. Components that had come apart reluctantly seemed even more resistant to being properly reinstalled. Her small hands struggled with the precise alignment required to seat the bolt carrier group correctly, and her nervous trembling made it difficult to maintain the steady pressure needed for proper installation. By the time she completed the exercise, most other students had finished and were cleaning their workstations while she continued struggling with basic procedures. Thompson approached her workstation as the lesson concluded, his expression unreadable as he examined her reassembled rifle. He performed a quick function check, cycling the action and testing the safety mechanism to ensure proper installation of internal components. The weapon functioned correctly, but Emma's technique had been so uncertain and hesitant that even successful completion felt like failure. "Rodriguez, you need to develop confidence in your movements," Thompson said quietly, his tone more instructive than critical. "Technical knowledge means nothing if you can't apply it smoothly and consistently. Practice the basic procedures until they become automatic, then worry about advanced techniques." Emma accepted his feedback with a quiet acknowledgement, gathering her notes and cleaning supplies while other students filed out of the armory toward their next scheduled activities. She remained behind to clean her workstation with meticulous attention to detail, ensuring that every tool was properly stored and every surface wiped clean of oil and debris. Her cleaning technique was systematic and thorough, revealing an attention to detail that didn't translate to her handling of actual weapons procedures. The afternoon brought written examinations that tested students' knowledge of technical specifications, maintenance schedules, and troubleshooting procedures. Emma excelled in this academic environment, her library science background providing her with effective study techniques and information retention skills that served her well on complex technical examinations. She scored consistently in the top 5% of the class on written tests, demonstrating comprehensive understanding of theoretical concepts and detailed technical knowledge that exceeded many of her more practically skilled classmates. However, her academic success only highlighted the contrast with her practical struggles. Students who scored lower on written examinations often performed significantly better during hands-on exercises, while Emma's theoretical knowledge seemed to evaporate when she attempted to apply it through actual weapons manipulation. The disconnect between what she knew intellectually and what she could perform physically created a frustrating situation that became more pronounced as the course progressed through increasingly complex procedures. During evening study sessions in the dormitory common areas, Emma often found herself working alone while other students formed collaborative groups that excluded her by default. She used this isolation productively, developing her own study methods that combined theoretical research with detailed analysis of technical manuals and maintenance publications. Her personal notes became comprehensive references that included information from official military publications, manufacturer specifications, and additional sources that she researched during her free time. Emma's background in information science led her to approach weapons training with research methodologies that went far beyond standard coursework requirements. She obtained technical manuals for weapon systems that weren't covered in basic training, studied historical development of military weapons to understand design principles, and researched advanced maintenance techniques used by specialized military units. Her personal library grew to include hundreds of pages of copied materials, technical diagrams, and detailed notes that represented far more comprehensive preparation than any other student attempted. Thompson noticed Emma's extensive preparation during his reviews of student progress, but her continued struggles with practical applications puzzled him. Students who demonstrated her level of theoretical knowledge typically showed corresponding improvement in hands-on skills, but Emma seemed unable to translate her academic understanding into physical competence. Her written work was among them the best he'd seen in years of instruction, but her practical performance remained inconsistent and marked by the same nervous hesitation that had characterized her first day. The second week of training introduced more complex weapons systems that required greater precision and technical sophistication. Students learned to maintain machine guns, grenade launchers, and specialized marksman rifles that demanded advanced knowledge of ballistics, metallurgy, and precision manufacturing tolerances. Emma's theoretical preparation served her well during classroom instruction, where her detailed notes and comprehensive research allowed her to answer technical questions that challenged other students. However, the practical exercises became increasingly difficult as weapon systems grew more complex and unforgiving of improper technique. Emma's nervous trembling seemed to worsen under pressure, and her small hands struggled with components that required significant force or leverage to manipulate properly. During one particularly challenging exercise involving a crew-served machine gun, her inability to properly install the barrel assembly resulted in a complete functional failure that required Thompson's intervention to correct. "All thumbs, Rodriguez," muttered Specialist Chun after observing Emma's latest struggle with a complex reassembly procedure. The comment wasn't intended maliciously, But it captured the growing perception among students that Emma's manual dexterity was fundamentally inadequate for weapons maintenance work. The nickname stuck with cruel efficiency, spreading through the student population as a shorthand description of Emma's apparent clumsiness with mechanical procedures. Students began referring to her as thumbs both to her face and behind her back, treating her struggles as a source of minor entertainment, rather than recognizing the dedication and effort she invested in trying to overcome her difficulties. Emma absorbed the mockery with outward composure while internally cataloging every failure and analyzing the technical reasons for her continued struggles. Her engineering mindset approached her problems systematically, breaking down complex procedures into component steps that could be practiced individually before being integrated into complete sequences. She spent hours after official training periods practicing basic movements, attempting to develop the muscle memory and confidence that seemed to come naturally to other students. The armory remained accessible during evening hours for students who wanted additional practice time, but Emma was typically the only person who took advantage of this opportunity. She worked alone in the vast space, surrounded by the tools and weapons that represented both her greatest challenge and her chosen profession. Her practice sessions were methodical and patient, repeating basic procedures dozens of times while focusing on smooth, consistent movements that might eventually overcome her natural nervousness. Thompson occasionally found Emma practicing during his evening rounds, her small figure hunched over a workstation as she repeatedly disassembled and reassembled the same rifle with mechanical persistence. Her dedication impressed him even as her continued struggles concerned him. Students who invested this level of effort typically showed measurable improvement, but Emma's progress remained frustratingly slow despite her obvious commitment to mastering the required skills. "Rodriguez, you're putting in the work," Thompson observed during one evening encounter. "Sometimes that's not enough if the fundamental approach is wrong. Consider whether you're trying too hard to be perfect instead of focusing on being smooth and confident." His advice was well-intentioned but difficult for Emma to implement. Her personality naturally gravitated toward perfection and precision, making it challenging to embrace the kind of relaxed confidence that characterized successful weapons maintenance. She understood intellectually that tension and overthinking were contributing to her problems, but knowing this didn't automatically provide her with the ability to change her approach. The third week of training introduced timed exercises that simulated the pressure and urgency of field conditions, where weapons maintenance might need to be performed quickly under stressful circumstances. Students were required to complete disassembly and reassembly procedures within specific time limits while maintaining accuracy and safety standards. These exercises separated students who had truly mastered the required skills from those who could perform adequately only under ideal conditions. Emma's performance during timed exercises was consistently poor, with her nervous tension increasing dramatically under time pressure. Her hands shook more noticeably when working against deadlines, and her tendency to overthink procedures became more pronounced when speed was required. She frequently failed to complete exercises within required time limits, even when her final results were technically correct. The combination of time pressure and performance anxiety created a feedback loop that made her difficulties increasingly severe. Morrison, Chun, and Kim formed an informal study group that met each evening to practice timed exercises and share techniques for improving speed and efficiency. Their collaborative approach allowed them to learn from each other's strengths while developing friendly competition that motivated continuous improvement. Emma was not invited to join these sessions, partly because her slow pace would have hindered their progress, and partly because her struggles made other students uncomfortable about their own performance. The exclusion from peer learning opportunities meant that Emma's preparation remained entirely self-directed, limiting her access to the kind of collaborative problem-solving that accelerated other students' development. She compensated by developing her own training methodologies based on research into motor skill development, performance psychology, and advanced training techniques used by elite military units. Her approach was more scientific and systematic than what other students employed, but it couldn't replicate the benefits of peer interaction and shared learning experiences. Emma's theoretical research had led her to discover advanced weapons, maintenance techniques that weren't covered in standard training curricula. She studied methods used by special operations units, competitive shooters, and civilian gunsmiths, who worked on high-precision weapon systems. This additional knowledge provided her with alternative approaches to common procedures and deeper understanding of the principles underlying proper maintenance techniques, but it also created the risk of overcomplicating basic tasks that required straightforward execution. Thompson began to notice that Emma's theoretical knowledge exceeded the scope of basic training requirements, but her practical application remained inconsistent with her academic understanding. During oral examinations, she could explain complex, technical concepts with impressive accuracy and detail, often providing information that went beyond what he expected from students at this level. However, her hands-on demonstrations of the same concepts were marked by the same hesitation and nervous trembling that had characterized her performance from the beginning. The disconnect between Emma's intellectual capabilities and her practical performance created a unique challenge for Thompson's instructional approach. Most struggling students showed consistent patterns across both theoretical and practical areas, making it relatively straightforward to identify appropriate remedial training. Emma's situation was more complex, requiring individual attention and specialized coaching that went beyond standard instructional methods. During the 4th week of training, Thompson scheduled individual consultation sessions with each student to assess progress and identify areas requiring additional focus. Emma's session was scheduled for late afternoon, when the armory was quiet and distractions were minimized. She arrived with a notebook filled with questions and observations about her performance, treating the consultation as an opportunity for detailed technical discussion rather than routine progress review. "Rodriguez, your theoretical knowledge is exceptional," Thompson began, reviewing her examination scores and written assignments. "You understand these weapon systems better than students who've been working with them for years. But your practical performance doesn't reflect that understanding. What do you think is causing the disconnect?" Emma had prepared for this question. Through extensive self-analysis and research into performance psychology, her response was characteristically thorough and well-researched, incorporating concepts from motor learning theory and cognitive psychology that Thompson hadn't expected from a basic training student. She explained her hypothesis that her nervous system was creating interference between conscious knowledge and automatic motor responses, resulting in performance anxiety that became self-reinforcing through repeated failure experiences. Her analysis was academically sound, but also revealed the extent to which she was overthinking problems that other students solved through intuitive feel and practiced repetition. Thompson recognized that Emma's intellectual approach, while impressive, might actually be contributing to her practical difficulties by creating cognitive load that interfered with the development of automatic motor skills. "Sometimes the best approach is to stop thinking and trust your hands," Thompson suggested. "You've got the knowledge. Now you need to develop the confidence to apply it without conscious control. That means accepting imperfection during the learning process and focusing on smooth movement rather than precise technique." Emma understood his advice intellectually, but found it difficult to implement emotionally. Her academic background had trained her to value precision and accuracy above all other considerations, making it psychologically challenging to embrace the kind of relaxed imprecision that might lead to better overall performance. She agreed to attempt his suggested approach, but privately doubted her ability to fundamentally change her learning style. The consultation concluded with Thompson assigning Emma additional practice time with simplified exercises designed to build basic motor skills without the complexity of complete weapons maintenance procedures. His remedial approach focused on developing muscle memory and confidence through repetitive execution of individual components rather than attempting to master complete sequences immediately. The plan was educationally sound but required Emma to accept slower progress in exchange for more solid foundational skills. Following Thompson's guidance, Emma modified her practice routine to emphasize simple, repetitive movements that could be performed without conscious thought. She practiced individual manipulation techniques until they became automatic, gradually building complexity by combining simple movements into more sophisticated sequences. Her approach was methodical and patient, treating motor skill development as another research problem that could be solved through systematic application of appropriate training methodologies. The modified practice routine began showing subtle improvements in Emma's confidence and smoothness of movement. Her hands shook less noticeably when performing familiar procedures, and her success rate increased measurably on basic disassembly and reassembly tasks. However, her progress remained slow compared to other students, and the improvements were often lost when time pressure or unfamiliar weapon systems were introduced during formal training exercises. By the end of the 4th week, Emma's position in the class rankings had solidified near the bottom, despite her exceptional theoretical knowledge and dedicated practice efforts. Other students had begun to treat her struggles as an accepted part of the classroom dynamic, with some offering occasional help, but most simply working around her limitations during group exercises. The All Thumbs nickname had become so commonly used that newer students assumed it was her actual name rather than a description of her perceived clumsiness. Emma's response to the mockery and marginalization was to intensify her preparation efforts rather than becoming discouraged. She viewed her struggles as technical problems that could be solved through sufficient research, practice, and systematic analysis. Her evening practice sessions extended longer, her note-taking became more detailed, and her research into advanced techniques became more comprehensive. She was determined to succeed through preparation and persistence, even if natural talent remained elusive. Thompson observed Emma's increased dedication with a mixture of admiration and concern. Her work ethic was exemplary, and her theoretical knowledge continued to expand beyond course requirements. But her practical performance remained inconsistent with her obvious intelligence and effort. He began to wonder whether traditional instructional methods were appropriate for a student whose learning style and psychological profile differed so significantly from typical military trainees. The weapons training program had been designed for students who learned primarily through hands-on experience and repetitive practice under instructor guidance. Emma's academic background and research-oriented approach represented a different learning style that might require modified instructional techniques to achieve success. However, military training programs typically emphasize standardized methods that could be applied consistently across diverse student populations, making individualized instruction difficult to implement within existing institutional structures. As the first month of training concluded, Emma had established herself as the most knowledgeable student in theoretical areas, while remaining the least competent in practical applications. Her situation had become a source of curiosity for other students and a professional challenge for Thompson, who recognized that her eventual success or failure would reflect on his teaching effectiveness as much as her individual capabilities. Emma's determination remained unshaken, despite her continued struggles and the social isolation that resulted from her academic focus and practical difficulties. She viewed the weapons training program as the first step toward a military career that would prove her capabilities beyond the limitations that others perceived. Her research had revealed specialized military occupations that valued technical knowledge and analytical skills over physical presence or conventional military bearing, providing her with long-term goals that justified enduring current challenges. The combination of exceptional theoretical knowledge and persistent, practical struggles created a unique dynamic that would define Emma's experience throughout the remainder of the training program. Her story was just beginning, with months of additional challenges ahead that would test not only her technical skills, but also her psychological resilience and determination to succeed in an environment that seemed designed for people with different capabilities and learning styles. Thompson's evening observations of Emma's solitary practice sessions had revealed the true extent of her dedication and the systematic approach she brought to overcoming her difficulties. While other students relaxed during off-duty hours or engaged in social activities, Emma remained focused on her professional development with an intensity that bordered on obsession. Her commitment was admirable, but also concerning, as it suggested someone who felt compelled to work twice as hard as others to achieve the same results. The foundation had been established for a story of perseverance and eventual triumph that would challenge assumptions about natural talent versus dedicated preparation. Emma's journey through the weapons training program would demonstrate that success could be achieved through different paths, even when those paths required overcoming obstacles that seemed insurmountable to conventional approaches. The fifth week of training brought an unwelcome surprise that would test every student's resolve and expose the true depth of their preparation. Thompson announced the introduction of combat simulation exercises, where students would maintain weapons under conditions designed to replicate battlefield stress. The armory was reconfigured with strobe lights, blasting speakers, and smoke machines that created an environment of controlled chaos meant to simulate artillery bombardments and combat pressure. Emma's performance under these simulated combat conditions deteriorated catastrophically. The combination of flashing lights, deafening noise, and artificial smoke triggered such severe anxiety that her hands shook uncontrollably. During her first attempt at field stripping an M4 under these conditions, she dropped the bolt carrier group 3 times and required nearly 15 minutes to complete a procedure that should have taken less than 2 minutes. Her failure was so complete and public that even Thompson seemed genuinely concerned about her psychological fitness for military service. The combat simulation failure became a turning point in how other students viewed Emma's struggles. What had previously been seen as simple clumsiness or lack of natural ability was now interpreted as fundamental unsuitability for military operations. Morrison, who had occasionally offered helpful suggestions during earlier training, began openly questioning whether Emma belonged in the program at all. His comments carried weight with other students because of his leadership role and his own impressive performance under pressure. Chun and Kim joined the chorus of doubt, expressing concerns about being assigned to field operations with someone whose performance collapsed so dramatically under stress. Their worries weren't entirely unreasonable from a practical military perspective, as weapons maintenance in combat situations required absolute reliability and confidence under the worst possible conditions. Emma's simulation performance suggested that she might become a liability rather than an asset when lives depended on properly functioning equipment. The social isolation that had been building throughout the first month crystallized into active exclusion after the combat simulation debacle. Students who had previously been merely indifferent to Emma's struggles now actively avoided association with her, fearing that her perceived weaknesses might reflect poorly on their own performance evaluations. The military's emphasis on team effectiveness meant that individual failures could impact group success, creating incentives for stronger performers to distance themselves from struggling colleagues. Emma found herself eating alone in the dining facility, studying alone in common areas, and practicing alone in the armory during evening hours, when other students gathered in groups to share techniques and encouragement. The isolation was psychologically challenging, but also provided her with uninterrupted time for the kind of intensive preparation that her learning style required. She began to view her exclusion from social activities as an opportunity rather than a punishment, allowing her to focus entirely on technical development without distractions. Thompson's approach to Emma's situation grew more directive as he recognized that standard remedial training wasn't producing adequate improvement. He assigned her additional individual practice sessions and modified her training schedule to include extra time with basic procedures before advancing to more complex systems. His interventions were well-intentioned, but also highlighted Emma's status as someone who required special accommodation rather than someone who could meet standard expectations. The additional training created a feedback loop that actually increased Emma's anxiety during regular class sessions. Other students noticed that she was receiving special attention and extra practice time, reinforcing their perception that she was fundamentally less capable than the rest of the group. Emma became hyper-aware of this attention, which increased her nervousness during public demonstrations and made her more likely to make visible mistakes that confirmed others' negative opinions. During the 6th week, Thompson introduced blindfolded weapon maintenance exercises designed to develop tactile familiarity with weapon systems that might need to be serviced in complete darkness. The exercises required students to disassemble and reassemble weapons using only their sense of touch, relying on muscle memory and intimate knowledge of component shapes and relationships. For most students, this represented the most challenging technical requirement they had encountered in the program. Emma's performance during the first blindfolded exercise surprised everyone, including herself. With visual distractions eliminated, her nervous trembling decreased significantly, and her small, sensitive fingers proved remarkably adept at identifying components and manipulating mechanisms through touch alone. She completed the basic M4 disassembly in nearly standard time and achieved correct reassembly on her first attempt, a dramatic improvement over her previous performance with the same weapon system. The unexpected success during blindfolded training provided Emma with the first concrete evidence that her difficulties might be more psychological than physical. When visual input was eliminated, the anxiety and self-consciousness that normally interfered with her performance were reduced, allowing her natural dexterity and extensive theoretical knowledge to function more effectively. The realization was both encouraging and frustrating, as it suggested that her struggles were self-imposed rather than reflecting inherent limitations. Thompson noticed Emma's improved performance during blindfolded exercises, but attributed it to reduced pressure, rather than recognizing the deeper implications of her success. His assessment notes indicated that she performed better when not being observed directly, which he interpreted as evidence of performance anxiety rather than understanding that visual processing might be interfering with her motor skill development. Emma began incorporating blindfolded practice into her evening training sessions, discovering that she could perform complex procedures with remarkable accuracy when relying solely on tactile feedback. Her fingers memorized the texture and weight of every component, the precise force required for each manipulation, and the subtle mechanical feedback that indicated proper assembly. Without visual input to create anxiety and overthinking, her body was free to learn the natural rhythms and movements that characterized expert weapon maintenance. The improvement in blindfolded performance coincided with Emma's discovery of advanced training materials that weren't part of the standard curriculum. During her extensive research sessions in the base library, she found technical manuals and training guides used by elite military units whose weapon maintenance requirements exceeded normal standards. These specialized publications described techniques and procedures that demanded extraordinary speed and precision under extreme conditions. Emma's academic background enabled her to understand and synthesize information from these advanced sources, giving her access to training methodologies that other students had never encountered. She learned about competition shooting sports where participants disassembled and reassembled weapons at speeds that seemed impossible, discovering that what appeared to be natural talent was actually the result of specific training techniques and systematic skill development. The competition shooting community had developed scientific approaches to motor skill training that incorporated principles from sports psychology, biomechanics, and cognitive science. Emma absorbed these methodologies with the same systematic thoroughness she applied to all technical subjects, creating her own training program that combined military procedures with advanced techniques used by civilian competitors who achieved levels of performance that exceeded military standards. Her evening practice sessions evolved into carefully structured training programs that incorporated interval training, progressive skill building, and performance measurement techniques borrowed from competitive athletics. Emma maintained detailed logs of her practice sessions, tracking improvement in speed, accuracy, and consistency across multiple weapon systems and increasingly complex procedures. Her approach was more scientific and systematic than anything taught in military training programs, reflecting her academic background and research capabilities. The gap between Emma's official class performance and her private training achievements grew wider as she developed skills that exceeded the scope of basic military training. During evening sessions, she could disassemble and reassemble standard weapons with speed and precision that would have impressed Thompson. But her performance during official training remained hampered by anxiety and self-consciousness that prevented her from demonstrating her true capabilities. Emma's research had revealed that many expert performers in technical fields experienced similar disconnects between private competence and public performance, particularly when psychological pressure interfered with automatic motor responses. She studied performance psychology literature and discovered techniques used by professional musicians, surgeons, and athletes to overcome performance anxiety and achieve consistent results under pressure. The psychological training techniques Emma discovered required the same systematic application that characterized her technical preparation. She practiced breathing exercises, visualization techniques, and mental rehearsal methods that were designed to maintain calm focus during high-pressure situations. Her approach to psychological preparation was as methodical and research-based as her technical training, reflecting her conviction that any skill could be improved through proper understanding and dedicated practice. During the 7th week of training, the program introduced competitive elements designed to motivate students and identify top performers who might be selected for advanced specialized training. Students were ranked based on their performance across multiple categories, including speed, accuracy, and performance under stress. The competitive atmosphere intensified existing social dynamics, with successful students forming elite groups while struggling students became increasingly marginalized. Emma's official ranking placed her near the bottom of the class despite her extensive preparation and growing private competence. The competitive scoring system emphasized public performance during timed exercises, areas where her anxiety continued to interfere with her ability to demonstrate her true skill level. Her theoretical knowledge scores remained among the highest in the class, but practical performance evaluations dragged down her overall ranking significantly. The competitive rankings created additional psychological pressure that made Emma's performance anxiety worse during official evaluations. She became increasingly aware of being observed and judged, which created a self-reinforcing cycle where poor public performance led to increased anxiety that guaranteed continued poor performance. The competitive environment that motivated other students became an additional obstacle for someone whose difficulties were primarily psychological rather than technical. Morrison, Chun, and Kim formed an official study team that was recognized by Thompson as representing the program's top performers. Their collaborative approach and consistent high performance made them role models for other students and candidates for selection to advanced specialized training programs. Emma's exclusion from this elite group was formalized through the competitive ranking system, making her marginalization official rather than merely social. The elite study team received additional privileges and opportunities that further separated them from struggling students. They gained access to advanced weapon systems that weren't part of standard training, participated in specialized workshops with guest instructors, and received individualized coaching that accelerated their development beyond normal program expectations. Emma watched these opportunities pass her by while maintaining her solitary preparation routine. Thompson's attention became increasingly focused on top performers who showed potential for advanced military specialties, while struggling students received more standardized remedial training that emphasized meeting minimum standards rather than achieving excellence. Emma found herself in a category of students who were expected to complete basic requirements, but weren't considered candidates for the kind of advanced training that would lead to prestigious military careers. The 8th week introduced night operations training, where students learned to maintain weapons in complete darkness using only red-filtered lights that preserved night vision. The training simulated conditions where weapons maintenance might be required during covert operations or tactical situations where normal lighting would compromise operational security. Most students found night operations extremely challenging, as familiar procedures became difficult when visual references were eliminated or severely limited. Emma's performance during night operations revealed the full extent of her hidden development. In low-light conditions that challenged other students, she demonstrated remarkable proficiency that seemed to contradict her daytime struggles. Her tactile familiarity with weapon systems, developed through months of blindfolded practice, gave her significant advantages when visual input was limited. She completed complex procedures with confidence and speed that surprised Thompson and puzzled her classmates. The night operation success provided Emma with temporary relief from the constant anxiety that plagued her daytime performance, but it also highlighted the psychological nature of her difficulties. When environmental conditions reduced the visibility of her performance and the pressure of being observed, her true capabilities emerged in ways that contradicted months of poor evaluations. However, the improvement was attributed to favorable conditions rather than recognizing Emma's actual skill level. Thompson began to notice patterns in Emma's performance that suggested her struggles were more complex than simple lack of ability. Her success in low-light conditions, combined with her exceptional theoretical knowledge and obvious dedication, indicated someone whose capabilities were being masked by psychological factors rather than limited by technical incompetence. However, military training programs were designed to evaluate performance under standard conditions, making it difficult to account for students whose abilities emerged only under specific circumstances. Emma's research into performance psychology had prepared her to understand the implications of her night operations success. She recognized that her difficulties were primarily related to performance anxiety and social pressure rather than fundamental inability to master required skills. This understanding was both encouraging and frustrating, as it confirmed that her problems were potentially solvable, but also highlighted how much her anxiety was limiting her demonstrated performance. Realization that her capabilities exceeded her official performance led Emma to intensify her private training even further. She began practicing under conditions that simulated the psychological pressure of public evaluation, attempting to bridge the gap between her private competence and her ability to perform under observation. Her training sessions incorporated stress inoculation techniques borrowed from military special operations training and competitive athletics. Emma's evening practice routine expanded to include mental rehearsal of successful performance under pressure, systematic desensitization to being observed while working, and progressive exposure to the kind of time pressure and evaluation stress that characterized official training exercises. Her approach was systematic and research-based, treating performance anxiety as another technical problem that could be solved through appropriate training methodologies. The 9th week of training introduced weapon modification exercises where Students learned to install accessories, adjust components, and customize weapons for specific operational requirements. The training required precise mechanical work that demanded steady hands and intimate familiarity with weapon systems. Most students found modification work challenging because it required greater precision than basic maintenance procedures and involved working with specialized tools and techniques. Emma's performance during modification training continued the pattern established during night operations, showing flashes of remarkable competence that contradicted her overall struggling. Status: when working on complex modification procedures that required careful attention to detail and precise manual dexterity, her small hands and extensive theoretical knowledge provided significant advantages. She completed several modification exercises, with results that impressed Thompson despite her continued difficulties with basic time procedures. The inconsistency in Emma's performance created confusion among instructors and students, who couldn't understand how someone could struggle with simple procedures while excelling at more complex tasks. Her modification work demonstrated technical understanding and manual skill that seemed incompatible with her reputation as someone whose hands were all thumbs. The contradiction highlighted the psychological nature of her difficulties while revealing capabilities that had been masked by performance anxiety. Thompson scheduled additional individual consultations with Emma to discuss her inconsistent performance and explore potential solutions to her ongoing difficulties. Their conversations revealed the depth of her preparation and the extent of her theoretical knowledge, but also highlighted the psychological barriers that prevented her from demonstrating her capabilities consistently. Thompson began to understand that Emma's situation required individualized approaches that went beyond standard remedial training. Emma's research had led her to discover that many expert performers in technical fields had overcome similar psychological barriers through specialized training that addressed performance anxiety directly rather than focusing solely on skill development. She learned about visualization techniques used by surgeons, breathing methods employed by precision shooters, and mental preparation strategies developed by competitive athletes who performed under extreme pressure. The psychological training techniques Emma studied required the same systematic application that characterized all her preparation efforts. She practiced mental rehearsal exercises where she visualized successful performance under various pressure conditions, learning to maintain calm focus despite external stressors. Her approach to psychological development was as methodical and research-based as her technical training, reflecting her conviction that mental skills could be developed through proper understanding and dedicated practice. During the 10th week, students faced their most challenging evaluation, yet comprehensive practical examinations that tested their mastery of all weapon systems covered in the program. The examinations were conducted under time pressure with multiple instructors observing and scoring performance across numerous categories. Success on these examinations determined students' final rankings and their eligibility for advanced specialized training programs. Emma approached the comprehensive examinations with months of hidden preparation that exceeded the scope of official training requirements. Her private practice sessions had developed capabilities that surpassed what other students achieved through standard coursework, but her performance anxiety remained a significant obstacle to demonstrating her true skill level during formal evaluations. The examinations represented a critical test of whether her psychological training would enable her to overcome the barriers that had limited her official performance. The first examination session focused on basic weapon systems that formed the foundation of the training program. Emma's performance was marked by the same nervous tension that had characterized her work throughout the course, but her extensive preparation enabled her to complete required procedures despite her obvious anxiety. Her results were adequate but unimpressive, maintaining her position near the bottom of class rankings while failing to reveal the depth of her actual capabilities. The gap between Emma's private competence and public performance remained frustratingly Why does she struggle to translate months of dedicated preparation into official recognition of her abilities? Her situation had become a case study in how psychological factors could prevent talented individuals from achieving their potential, even when their preparation exceeded normal standards. The stage was set for a dramatic revelation that would finally demonstrate the true extent of her hidden capabilities and challenge everyone's assumptions about natural talent versus systematic preparation. Thompson's growing awareness of Emma's complex situation led him to consider alternative evaluation methods that might provide more accurate assessment of her true capabilities. However, military training programs emphasize standardized procedures that could be applied consistently across all students, making individualized evaluation approaches difficult to implement within existing institutional frameworks. Emma's eventual success would require not only overcoming her personal psychological barriers but also finding ways to demonstrate her capabilities within systems that weren't designed to account for her unique learning style and performance patterns. The foundation had been established for a dramatic transformation that would reveal Emma's true capabilities and challenge fundamental assumptions about how talent is recognized and developed in institutional training programs. Her story continued building toward a climactic demonstration that would finally allow her hidden preparation and dedication to be revealed in ways that could not be dismissed or overlooked by those who had underestimated her throughout the training process. The announcement came during the 11th week of training, delivered with the kind of military precision that left no room for questions or hesitation. Colonel Patricia Hawkins, commanding officer of the Advanced Training Command, stood before the assembled students with news that would reshape their understanding of military priorities and individual capability. The International Military Skills Competition was accepting entries for the first time in 5 years, and Fort McKinley had been selected to provide a representative who would compete against the world's most elite military technicians in a series of challenges that tested the absolute limits of technical proficiency and performance under pressure. The competition represented the pinnacle of military technical achievement, where specialists from dozens of countries demonstrated capabilities that pushed the boundaries of human performance in weapons maintenance, tactical medicine, communications, technology, and precision marksmanship. Previous competitions had produced legendary performances that became case studies in military training programs worldwide, establishing benchmarks for technical excellence that seemed almost superhuman to ordinary military personnel. Colonel Hawkins explained that the weapons maintenance category required competitors to demonstrate mastery across 20 different weapon systems from various international manufacturers, performing complete disassembly and reassembly under time constraints that eliminated all but the most exceptionally prepared participants. The complexity exceeded anything taught in standard military training, requiring intimate familiarity with weapons that most technicians never encountered during entire military careers. The selection process would be based on a single elimination trial where students would face the exact challenge that awaited at the international competition. 20 different weapons would be presented simultaneously, ranging from standard infantry rifles to specialized crew-served systems, precision sniper weapons, and exotic foreign designs that few American military personnel had ever handled. Competitors would have exactly 5 minutes to field strip and reassemble all 20 weapons while blindfolded, with any incomplete weapon resulting in immediate disqualification. Thompson's expression remained professionally neutral as he absorbed the implications of the colonel's announcement, but internally he understood that none of his current students possessed the combination of speed, knowledge, and mental toughness required for such an extreme challenge. The best performers in his class could handle perhaps half the weapons in the allotted time, and even that would require perfect execution without the additional complexity of working blindfolded. Morrison, Chun, and Kim exchanged glances that reflected both excitement and apprehension about the opportunity to represent their country in international competition. Their confidence in their own abilities was substantial, earned through months of consistent high performance, but they also recognized that the described challenge exceeded their current capabilities by a significant margin. The gap between classroom excellence and international competition standards was vast and intimidating. Emma listened to the colonel's description with growing fascination rather than intimidation. Her extensive research into competitive shooting sports and elite military training had familiarized her with exactly this type of extreme performance challenge. She understood that success required not just technical knowledge, but also the kind of systematic preparation and psychological conditioning that she had been developing through months of hidden training. The weapons list that Colonel Hawkins distributed included systems that Emma had studied extensively during her independent research, but that weren't covered in standard training curricula. Her academic background had led her to investigate international weapons designs, manufacturing variations, and technical specifications that went far beyond normal military requirements. She recognized most of the listed weapons and understood their operating principles, despite never having handled them physically. Thompson announced that interested students had 72 hours to volunteer for the selection trial, with the understanding that failure would be public and potentially career-limiting for those whose performance fell dramatically short of competition standards. The psychological pressure was intentional, designed to eliminate candidates who lacked absolute confidence in their abilities or who might be overwhelmed by the international competition environment. Emma's decision to volunteer was immediate and unwavering. Despite the skeptical reactions her announcement generated among classmates and instructors, her reputation as someone who struggled with basic procedures made her candidacy seem almost delusional to observers who had witnessed months of nervous fumbling and performance anxiety. Morrison actually laughed when he heard about Emma's volunteer status, treating it as evidence of poor judgment rather than hidden capability. Thompson's response to Emma's candidacy was more measured but equally skeptical. He respected her theoretical knowledge and acknowledged her improvement in certain specialized areas, but he couldn't reconcile her demonstrated capabilities with the extreme demands of international competition. His professional obligation required him to evaluate all volunteers fairly, but his practical assessment suggested that Emma's participation would be brief and embarrassing. The 72-hour preparation period became a test of individual commitment resourcefulness as volunteers attempted to prepare for challenges that exceeded their previous training. Morrison, Chun, and Kim formed a collaborative preparation group that pooled their knowledge and divided research responsibilities across the 20 weapon systems. Their approach was logical and systematic, representing the kind of team effort that normally produced optimal results in military training environments. Emma's preparation took a dramatically different approach that reflected her unique background and learning style. Instead of attempting to cram unfamiliar information in the limited time available, she drew upon months of independent research that had already familiarized her with most of the required weapon systems. Her preparation focused on mental rehearsal and psychological conditioning rather than basic technical learning. Her evening practice sessions during the preparation period were unlike anything other volunteers attempted. Emma worked with familiar weapons while blindfolded, but she incorporated advanced techniques borrowed from competitive speed shooting and special operations, training that pushed her performance beyond normal military standards. Her movements became fluid and automatic, guided by muscle memory and tactile feedback rather than conscious thought. The psychological preparation techniques Emma employed were based on research into peak performance under extreme pressure. She practiced breathing exercises that maintained calm focus despite external stressors, visualization methods that programmed successful performance patterns, and mental rehearsal scenarios that prepared her for the specific conditions of the selection trial. Her approach treated the challenge as a combination of technical demonstration and psychological test. Thompson observed portions of Emma's preparation sessions and noticed improvements in her fluidity and confidence that seemed inconsistent with her reputation as a struggling student. Her blindfolded work with familiar weapons demonstrated capabilities that he hadn't seen during classroom training, suggesting that her difficulties were more situational than fundamental. However, the gap between her observed capabilities and the extreme demands of the competition remained substantial. The selection trial was scheduled for 0800 hours on Friday morning in the main armory, which had been reconfigured to accommodate the specific requirements of the competition simulation. 20 weapon stations were arranged in a precise grid pattern, each containing a different weapon system, with all components present but not assembled. The layout replicated the exact configuration that would be used at the international competition, ensuring that the selection process provided accurate assessment of competitive readiness. Colonel Hawkins would personally observe the trial along with Thompson and 2 additional senior instructors, whose evaluations would determine not only the competition representative, but also the credibility of Fort McKinley's training programs. The presence of senior leadership added psychological pressure that was intended to simulate the stress environment of international competition, where individual performance reflected on institutional reputation. Emma arrived at the armory 30 minutes before the scheduled trial time, carrying only a small notebook containing her final preparation notes. Her demeanor was notably calmer than her typical classroom anxiety, reflecting months of psychological conditioning that had prepared her specifically for high-pressure performance situations. She moved through the weapon stations methodically, visually inspecting each system and mentally rehearsing the procedures she would employ during the actual trial. Morrison, Chun, and Kim arrived as a group, their conversation reflecting nervous energy and mutual encouragement, designed to maintain confidence despite their apprehension about the challenge ahead. Their collaboration continued even during the final preparation minutes, as they shared last-minute technical reminders and psychological support. Their approach represented traditional military teamwork adapted to individual competition requirements. Thompson's final briefing emphasized the exact parameters of the challenge and the scoring criteria that would determine success or failure. Complete disassembly and reassembly of all 20 weapons within 5 minutes while blindfolded, with any incomplete weapon resulting in automatic disqualification regardless of performance on other systems. The standards were absolute and unforgiving, reflecting the reality that international competition would provide no accommodation for partial success or near misses. The trial began with volunteers drawing lots to determine performance order, a random selection process that added another element of pressure by eliminating control over timing and sequence. Emma drew the final position, meaning she would perform last after watching 4 other attempts and understanding exactly what level of performance was required for success. The delay created additional time for anxiety to build, but also provided opportunity to learn from others' mistakes and successes. Morrison performed first, demonstrating the technical competence and systematic approach that had made him a class leader throughout the training program. His movements were deliberate and accurate, successfully completing disassembly and reassembly of 14 weapons before time expired. His performance was impressive by normal standards, but fell significantly short of the required completion rate, establishing a baseline that seemed almost impossible to exceed. Chun's attempt followed a similar pattern, with strong technical execution that yielded completion of 16 weapons before time constraints forced termination. Her engineering background provided advantages in understanding mechanical relationships and systematic troubleshooting, but the sheer scope of the challenge exceeded her preparation despite months of dedicated training. Her performance was among the best Thompson had ever observed from a student, yet it remained inadequate for competition selection. Kim achieved completion of 15 weapons, with his infantry experience providing practical advantages in handling familiar systems but offering little help with exotic foreign designs that required specialized knowledge. His attempt demonstrated that broad military experience, while valuable, couldn't substitute for the specific preparation required for extreme technical challenges. The pattern of impressive but insufficient performance continued across all conventional candidates. The fourth volunteer, Specialist Rebecca Torres, who had transferred from ordnance disposal training, managed completion of 17 weapons through a combination of technical knowledge and exceptional focus under pressure. Her performance represented the highest completion rate achieved and suggested that the required standard might be achievable, but her final result still fell 3 weapons short of the minimum requirement for competition qualification. Emma's preparation during the waiting period involved mental rehearsal and breathing exercises that maintained calm focus despite the mounting evidence that the challenge exceeded normal human capabilities. She had observed the techniques and approaches used by previous volunteers, noting both effective strategies and critical mistakes that could be avoided through proper execution. Her psychological conditioning had prepared her for exactly this situation where pressure mounted and success seemed increasingly unlikely. When her turn arrived, Emma approached the weapon stations with movements that seemed almost casual compared to the intense concentration displayed by previous volunteers. Her blindfold was secured according to exact specifications, eliminating all visual input while leaving her other senses fully functional. The timer was set for 5 minutes, with Colonel Hawkins personally monitoring the countdown while Thompson and the other instructors positioned themselves to observe and evaluate her performance. The transformation that occurred when Emma began working was immediate and dramatic, challenging every assumption that observers held about her capabilities and preparation level. Her movements became fluid and purposeful in ways that contradicted months of observed struggling and nervous fumbling. Her hands moved across the weapons with confidence and precision that seemed to emerge from deep muscle memory and extensive preparation that had remained hidden from casual observation. Emma's approach to the challenge was systematically different from previous volunteers, who had attempted to work through the weapons in linear sequence. Instead, she moved between stations in a pattern that optimized efficiency and minimized transition time, demonstrating strategic planning that went beyond simple technical knowledge. Her movements between weapons were smooth and purposeful, suggesting comprehensive preparation that had considered not just individual procedures, but also optimal workflow under time pressure. Her technique with each weapon system revealed intimate familiarity that exceeded what could be achieved through classroom training alone. Emma's hands identified components through touch with accuracy that suggested thousands of repetitions, and her disassembly procedures followed patterns that maximized speed without sacrificing precision. She worked with exotic foreign weapons as confidently as with standard American systems, demonstrating knowledge that came from extensive independent research and preparation. The first weapon was completed in less than 10 seconds, a time that would have been impressive for an expert working with visual guidance. Emma's blindfolded performance suggested capabilities that challenged the fundamental assumptions about normal human limitations under such extreme conditions. Her movements continued with the same fluid confidence as she progressed through increasingly complex systems without apparent difficulty or hesitation. Thompson found himself leaning forward with growing amazement as Emma's performance continued to exceed all expectations and challenge everything he thought he understood about her capabilities. The student who had struggled with basic procedures under normal classroom conditions was demonstrating mastery that exceeded the performance of students he had considered far more capable. The contradiction forced him to reconsider his entire assessment of her potential and preparation. By the 3-minute mark, Emma had completed 15 weapons, matching the performance of the most successful previous volunteer while maintaining a pace that suggested she could achieve complete success within the allotted time. Her movements remained smooth and confident without visible signs of fatigue or stress that had affected other competitors. The psychological conditioning that she had developed through months of hidden preparation was enabling her to maintain peak performance under extreme pressure. Colonel Hawkins watched Emma's performance with growing recognition that she was witnessing something exceptional that challenged conventional understanding of training effectiveness and individual capability. The systematic preparation and technical mastery being demonstrated suggested developmental processes that went far beyond standard military training programs. Emma's performance was revealing capabilities that had been masked by surface-level evaluations and conventional assessment methods. Emma's work with the final 5 weapons maintained the same precision and efficiency that had characterized her entire performance. Complex foreign systems were disassembled and reassembled with the same confident fluidity as familiar American weapons, demonstrating comprehensive preparation that had covered every aspect of the required challenge. Her breathing remained controlled and steady, indicating psychological conditioning that prevented performance degradation under mounting time pressure. The 18th weapon was completed with 47 seconds remaining on the timer, providing adequate time for the final 2 systems, while maintaining the measured pace that had carried her through the entire challenge. Emma's performance had transcended simple technical demonstration to become a masterclass in systematic preparation and performance under extreme pressure. Her movements had achieved a level of efficiency and precision that challenged fundamental assumptions about human capability under such demanding conditions. The 19th weapon yielded to her systematic approach with 26 seconds remaining, leaving time for careful completion of the final system without rushed movements that might compromise accuracy. Emma's performance had maintained consistency throughout the entire trial, demonstrating the kind of deep preparation and psychological conditioning that enabled sustained peak performance under conditions that overwhelmed less prepared competitors. The final weapon was a complex Belgian design that few American military personnel had ever encountered, requiring knowledge of specialized mechanisms and assembly sequences that weren't covered in any standard training curriculum. Emma's handling of this exotic system demonstrated the full scope of her independent research and preparation, as her fingers moved through unfamiliar components with the same confidence she had shown with standard American weapons. With 8 seconds remaining on the timer, Emma completed the final reassembly procedure and stepped back from the weapon stations. Her performance had achieved complete success where every other volunteer had fallen short, demonstrating capabilities that exceeded normal expectations by such a significant margin that observers struggled to process what they had witnessed. The blindfold was removed to reveal calm confidence that contrasted sharply with the exhausted strain shown by previous competitors. The silence that followed Emma's performance lasted several seconds as observers processed the implications of what they had witnessed. The student who had been dismissed as clumsy and unsuited for technical work had just demonstrated capabilities that exceeded those of students considered far more promising. Her performance challenged fundamental assumptions about how talent is recognized and developed within military training systems. Colonel Hawkins was the first to speak, her voice carrying a mixture of amazement and professional respect that marked a complete transformation in how Emma's capabilities were perceived. The performance had revealed not just technical mastery, but also the kind of systematic preparation and mental toughness that characterized truly exceptional military personnel. Emma's success represented validation of alternative approaches to training and development that challenged conventional wisdom about natural talent versus dedicated preparation. Thompson's assessment of Emma underwent a complete revision as he recognized that her classroom struggles had masked preparation and capabilities that far exceeded normal student achievement. Her performance demonstrated that traditional evaluation methods had failed to identify exceptional potential that manifested under specific conditions, requiring extreme technical skill and psychological resilience. The realization was both professionally embarrassing and intellectually fascinating for an instructor who prided himself on recognizing talent. Morrison, Chun, Kim, and Torres watched Emma's post-performance debriefing with expressions that mixed genuine admiration with confusion about how their assessments of her capabilities had been so completely wrong. Their collaborative preparation and strong classroom performance had been exceeded by someone whose individual approach and hidden preparation had achieved results that seemed almost impossible. The experience challenged their understanding of effective training methods and competitive preparation. Emma's selection as Fort McKinley's representative to the International Military Skills Competition was unanimous and immediate, with Colonel Hawkins authorizing additional resources and specialized training that would prepare her for the even more demanding challenges of international competition. Her performance had elevated her from struggling student to elite competitor in the span of 5 minutes, demonstrating the power of systematic preparation combined with psychological conditioning. The transformation in how Emma was perceived by classmates and instructors was immediate and complete, but her own response remained characteristically measured and professional. She accepted the selection with quiet confidence while acknowledging the additional preparation that would be required for success at the international level. Her approach to recognition was the same as her approach to criticism, treating both as information to be processed rather than validation to be celebrated. Thompson's conversation with Emma following her selection revealed the full scope of her hidden preparation and the systematic approach she had taken to developing capabilities that exceeded normal training program outcomes. Her research into competitive shooting, special operations training methods, and performance psychology had created a comprehensive development program that addressed both technical and psychological requirements for extreme performance. Her success validated alternative approaches to military training that emphasized individual preparation and psychological conditioning. The news of Emma's selection spread throughout Fort McKinley with speed that reflected the dramatic nature of her transformation from struggling student to international competitor. Her story became a case study in hidden potential and the importance of looking beyond surface-level performance when evaluating individual capabilities. The implications extended beyond individual success to challenge institutional assumptions about effective training and talent identification. Emma's preparation for international competition would require even more intensive development, but her selection trial performance had demonstrated that she possessed both the technical foundation and psychological resilience required for success at the highest levels of military competition. Her journey from dismissed student to elite competitor was complete, but the ultimate test of her capabilities awaited at the international arena, where she would face the world's most exceptional military technicians. The International Military Skills Competition Arena in Geneva buzzed with the controlled energy of elite military personnel from 37 nations, each representative having earned their position through trials that tested the absolute limits of technical proficiency and mental resilience. Emma walked through the weapon inspection area with quiet confidence, her small frame moving between towering competitors whose physical presence commanded immediate attention from spectators and officials. Her preparation during the weeks following selection had transformed from hidden individual effort into official institutional support, with Thompson personally overseeing advanced training protocols designed specifically for international competition demands. The relationship between instructor and student had evolved into professional collaboration between recognized experts, with Thompson learning as much from Emma's systematic approach as he contributed through his decades of military experience. The weapons array for international competition exceeded even the demanding selection trial standards, featuring 43 different systems from manufacturers spanning 6 continents. Emma's pre-competition inspection revealed familiar designs alongside exotic prototypes that challenged conventional understanding of weapons engineering. Her research capabilities had prepared her for this complexity, with months of technical study covering manufacturing variations and operational principles that few competitors could match. Colonel Hawkins observed Emma's preparation rituals with professional fascination, recognizing psychological conditioning techniques that reflected sophisticated understanding of peak performance principles. Emma's breathing exercises and mental rehearsal patterns demonstrated systematic development that went beyond intuitive talent to encompass learned skills in stress management and focus maintenance. Her approach challenged traditional military thinking about natural ability versus systematic preparation. The competition format allowed each representative 47 minutes to demonstrate complete mastery across all weapon systems, with scoring based on accuracy, speed, and technique under observed evaluation by international judges, whose expertise represented the pinnacle of military technical knowledge. Emma would compete blindfolded by choice, a decision that surprised officials, but reflected her understanding of optimal performance conditions for her specific preparation style. Morrison, Chun, and Kim attended as official observers, their presence representing both support for their former classmate and professional interest in techniques that had produced such dramatic transformation. Their collaborative study methods had yielded strong conventional results, but Emma's individual approach had achieved outcomes that challenged their understanding of effective preparation and competitive performance. Emma's competition performance began with systematic efficiency that immediately distinguished her approach from conventional competitors who relied primarily on speed and physical presence. Her movements between weapon stations followed optimized patterns that minimized transition time while maintaining calm focus, demonstrating strategic thinking that complemented her technical mastery. Each system yielded to procedures that reflected thousands of hours of specialized preparation. The international judges observed Emma's work with growing recognition that they were witnessing something exceptional that transcended normal competition standards. Her technique with unfamiliar foreign weapons matched her fluency with standard systems, indicating comprehensive preparation that covered manufacturing variations and design principles rather than simple memorization of specific procedures. Her performance represented mastery rather than mere competence. Swiss competitors, renowned for precision engineering knowledge, struggled with exotic Asian designs that Emma handled with casual expertise. German representatives, trained in systematic methodology, found themselves outpaced by someone whose preparation had incorporated their techniques while adding innovations that improved efficiency. Emma's performance was revealing the limitations of conventional training approaches that emphasize specialization over comprehensive development. The spectator gallery filled with military personnel whose initial skepticism about the small American representative transformed into professional admiration as Emma's systematic demolition of competition records continued. Her blindfolded work eliminated the psychological pressure that affected competitors working under direct observation, allowing her natural capabilities to function without interference from performance anxiety. Thompson watched Emma's progress with a mixture of pride and professional vindication, recognizing that his initial assessment methods had failed to identify exceptional potential that manifested under specific conditions. Her success validated alternative approaches to military training that emphasized individual development over standardized group instruction. The implications extended beyond individual achievement to challenge institutional assumptions about talent, identification, and development. Colonel Hawkins documented Emma's performance for institutional analysis, understanding that her techniques and preparation methods represented valuable innovations that could improve military training effectiveness. Emma's transformation from struggling student to international champion provided case study material that would influence training doctrine and assessment procedures throughout the military education system. Emma completed the weapons challenge with 14 minutes remaining on the official timer, achieving perfect scores across all evaluation categories while maintaining the calm composure that characterized her entire performance. Her success exceeded competition records by margins that suggested not just superior preparation, but fundamental innovations in training methodology and psychological conditioning. The victory ceremony recognized Emma as the youngest competitor ever to achieve perfect scores in international weapons competition, with her performance establishing new benchmarks for technical excellence that would influence future competition standards. Her medal represented not just individual achievement, but validation of systematic preparation methods that challenged conventional wisdom about natural talent versus dedicated development. Emma's post-competition interviews revealed the depth of research and systematic thinking that had produced her exceptional results. Her explanation of training methodologies incorporated concepts from competitive athletics, performance psychology, and advanced military doctrine that most competitors had never encountered. Her success was inspiring broader recognition that excellence could be achieved through systematic preparation, regardless of initial apparent limitations. The transformation in military training protocols that followed Emma's competition success reflected institutional recognition that traditional assessment methods had failed to identify exceptional potential. Her story became required reading in military education programs, with her techniques influencing curriculum development and instructor training throughout the armed forces. Thompson's promotion to Master Sergeant was accompanied by assignment to develop advanced training programs based on Emma's methods, with his experience managing her development providing valuable insights into individualized instruction and alternative assessment approaches. His collaboration with Emma continued as they refined training protocols that could identify and develop hidden potential in students whose capabilities weren't apparent through conventional evaluation. Emma's assignment to the Advanced Training Command as Chief Weapons Instructor represented unprecedented recognition for someone whose military career had begun with apparent failure and struggled performance. Her new role involved developing training programs that incorporated her research-based methods while maintaining military standards for technical competence and operational readiness. The specialized training facility that Emma designed incorporated innovations borrowed from competitive athletics, performance psychology, and advanced manufacturing techniques that pushed military training beyond traditional limitations. Her programs produced graduates whose technical capabilities exceeded previous standards, while demonstrating psychological resilience that enhanced performance under combat conditions. Morrison, Chun, and Kim requested transfer to Emma's advanced programs, recognizing that her systematic approach could enhance their own development beyond what conventional training provided. Their collaboration evolved from exclusion to partnership, as they contributed their own strengths while learning techniques that had produced Emma's exceptional results. Emma's research into training methodology continued expanding as she developed programs for specialized military units whose operational requirements demanded capabilities beyond normal standards. Her systematic approach to skill development influenced training doctrine across multiple military specialties, with her techniques being adapted for applications ranging from medical training to communications technology. The weapons maintenance facility that bore Emma's name became a center for innovation and excellence that attracted military personnel from allied nations seeking advanced training opportunities. Her legacy extended beyond individual achievement to encompass institutional transformation that improved military effectiveness through enhanced technical competence and systematic preparation methods. Emma's evening practice sessions continued with the same dedication that had characterized her student years, but now her individual preparation contributed to research and development that benefited thousands of military personnel. Her personal pursuit of excellence had evolved into institutional transformation that challenged fundamental assumptions about human potential and effective training methodology. The annual Emma Rodriguez Memorial Lecture Series brought together experts from military, academic, and competitive communities to explore innovations in human performance development and training effectiveness. Her story provided inspiration for researchers investigating the relationship between systematic preparation and exceptional achievement across diverse fields of endeavor. Emma's influence on military culture extended beyond technical training to encompass broader recognition that excellence could emerge from unexpected sources when proper support and development opportunities were provided. Her transformation from dismissed student to institutional leader demonstrated that apparent limitations often masked exceptional potential that required appropriate conditions and preparation methods to manifest. The quiet confidence that had carried Emma through her student struggles evolved into professional leadership that inspired others to pursue excellence through systematic preparation and dedicated effort. Her approach to recognition remained characteristically measured, treating success as validation of systematic methods rather than personal accomplishment worthy of celebration. Thompson's retirement ceremony included recognition that his collaboration with Emma had produced innovations that transformed military training effectiveness while challenging conventional assumptions about talent identification and development. Their partnership demonstrated that institutional excellence could emerge from recognition and support of individual potential, regardless of initial apparent limitations. Emma's continued service in the military reflected commitment to institutional improvement and individual development that transcended personal achievement to encompass broader mission of national defense and military effectiveness. Her systematic approach to excellence had become integral to institutional culture that valued preparation, dedication, and innovative thinking over conventional measures of natural ability. Years later, when new students arrived at advanced training programs, they found Emma's photograph displayed prominently alongside recognition that systematic preparation could overcome any perceived limitation when combined with dedication and proper methodology. Her legacy lived not in monuments to heroism, but in training programs that helped others discover and develop capabilities they never knew they possessed. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.